The night of December 29th, 2007, was draped in an unusual darkness over Chelembra, a quiet town in Kerala's Malappuram district. Rain fell relentlessly from the sky, a torrential downpour that seemed determined to wash the world clean. It hammered against rooftops and turned the narrow lanes into glistening, muddy streams. The wind howled like a mournful ghost, swaying the tall coconut palms back and forth in a frantic dance. Most of the town was asleep, tucked away from the storm's fury. Lights were out in almost every home, leaving the streets to the mercy of the tempest and the occasional flickering streetlight that cast long, eerie shadows. Amidst this chaos of nature, the South Malabar Gramin Bank stood silent and unassuming. It was a two-story building on a relatively busy street, though on this night the street was utterly deserted. The bank occupied the first floor, a fortress of concrete and steel that held the dreams and savings of the local community. Below it, on the ground floor, was a recently opened restaurant, its sign barely visible through the sheets of rain. The restaurant was dark, its shutters pulled down tight. No one would have guessed that this ordinary-looking building was about to become the stage for one of India's most audacious crimes. The rain provided the perfect cover, muffling any sound that might escape into the night. It was as if the heavens themselves were conspiring with the unseen forces at work. The world was deaf to anything but the storm's roar. This wasn't just any robbery. It was meticulously planned, a plot worthy of a blockbuster film. The culprits aimed to steal an astonishing 80 kilograms of gold and 2.5 million rupees in cash. Their inspiration? A Bollywood movie. Their goal? To commit the perfect crime, leaving no trace behind for the authorities to follow. The stage was set for a real-life money heist. The bank, a symbol of security and trust, was vulnerable. Its thick walls and reinforced strong room were believed to be impenetrable. The people of Chelembra slept soundly, unaware that their trust was about to be shattered. The storm raged on, a dramatic soundtrack to the silent, methodical work happening within the building's lower level. Every gust of wind, every clap of thunder was a gift to the thieves, masking their activities and allowing them to proceed with their daring plan. The night was long, and by the time the sun rose, nothing in the small town of Chelembra would ever be the same again. In a dimly lit room, far from the storm-swept streets of Chelembra, a man named Joseph, also known as Jason, meticulously reviewed his plans. He was the mastermind, the architect of this audacious scheme. Joseph was not your typical criminal. He was intelligent, patient, and incredibly methodical. His face, illuminated by the low glow of a single bulb, was a mask of intense concentration. Spread before him were hand-drawn blueprints of the bank building, notes on security patrol timings, and calculations of the vault's thickness. He had spent months gathering this intelligence, leaving no stone unturned in his quest for perfection. Joseph's inspiration came from an unlikely source, the 2004 Bollywood blockbuster, Dhoom. He had watched the film repeatedly, mesmerized by a scene where a gang of thieves drills a hole through the floor of a building to rob a bank vault below. The idea took root in his mind, growing from a fanciful thought into a concrete, actionable plan. He believed he could replicate the feat, but with even greater precision and stealth. He saw himself as the protagonist of his own movie, a clever anti-hero who could outsmart the entire system. He was driven not just by greed, but by the challenge of pulling off the impossible. He carefully assembled his team, a small, loyal crew who shared his ambition and were willing to take the enormous risk. There was Shibu, an expert driver, Radha Krishna, a skilled mason, and a few others. each chosen for a specific role. Joseph was the undisputed leader, the one who envisioned the entire operation from start to finish. He explained the plan to them with the confidence of a seasoned general briefing his troops before a major battle. He emphasized the need for absolute secrecy and discipline. They were not just committing a robbery, they were creating a legend. For weeks, Joseph lived and breathed the heist. His mind was a whirlwind of logistics, contingencies, and escape routes. He studied the bank's layout, noting the exact position of the strong room. He researched the best tools for drilling through reinforced concrete, calculating the time it would take. Every detail was planned to the second. He knew that the slightest mistake could lead to their downfall. This was not a gamble. In his mind, it was a perfectly engineered operation, a symphony of crime where he was the conductor, and the prize was a fortune beyond their wildest dreams. The first step in Joseph's master plan was to establish a legitimate presence right under the bank's nose. In early November 2007, he rented the vacant ground floor space directly beneath the South Malabar Gramin Bank. To the outside world, it seemed like a perfectly normal business venture. Joseph and his crew put up a sign that read Chelembra Restaurant and Catering, announcing the imminent opening of a new eatery. They brought in tables, chairs, and kitchen equipment, creating a convincing facade. The locals were curious, but unsuspecting, pleased that the empty space was finally being put to good use. By day, the gang played their roles to perfection. They transformed into hard-working entrepreneurs and laborers, busying themselves with the supposed renovation of their new restaurant. They would carry sacks of cement, stacks of wood, and tools in and out of the building in broad daylight. They interacted with neighbors, smiled at passers-by, and even spoke about their menu plans. This dual identity was crucial. They were hiding in plain sight, their criminal intent masked by the mundane activities of setting up a small business. They were carpenters, painters, and businessmen by day, their true purpose hidden behind a wall of normalcy. But when night fell and the town of Chelembra settled into its slumber, the restaurant's shutters would come down and the real work would begin. The gang would shed their daytime personas and become a team of determined drillers. The sounds of their work were a constant threat. They had to be incredibly careful. The rhythmic hammering and grinding of their tools had to be muffled. They often worked during thunderstorms or when loud festivals were happening nearby, using the ambient noise to their advantage. It was a nerve-wracking existence, living a lie 24 hours a day. Over several weeks, this exhausting routine continued. They maintained their cover story with unwavering discipline, even starting some minor cooking to let the aroma of food waft out, further cementing their disguise. The physical and mental strain was immense. They worked tirelessly through the nights, drilling upwards, inch by painstaking inch, towards the bank's concrete floor. The restaurant was their Trojan horse, a brilliant piece of deception that allowed them to be physically close to their target without raising a single alarm. Their patience and meticulous planning were slowly but surely paying off. The process of drilling through the bank's floor, honestly, was a monumental test of endurance and precision. The strongroom floor wasn't just simple concrete. It was a thick slab, heavily reinforced with steel rods designed to withstand exactly this kind of assault. Joseph and his team had to work with a combination of heavy-duty drills, gas cutters, and hammers. Each night was a battle against time and exhaustion. The air in the sealed-off room would grow thick with dust and the acrid smell of burning metal, making it really difficult to breathe. Their arms would ache and their ears would ring from the deafening noise. They worked in shifts, one man drilling, another standing guard, listening for any sound from the outside. A third would clear away the debris, packing it into sacks to be disposed of discreetly the next day. They had to be methodical, creating a hole just large enough for a person to squeeze through, but not so large that it would compromise the structural integrity of the floor and cause a collapse. They were like surgeons, performing a delicate and dangerous operation on the very foundation of the bank. Every millimeter of progress was a hard-won victory. Day after day, the pile of concrete and steel rubble grew, a testament to their relentless effort. They would load the debris onto a truck, hidden among construction materials for their fake restaurant, and dump it in remote locations. The risk of being discovered was constant. A curious neighbor, a passing police patrol, or even an unexpected visit from the building's owner could bring their entire operation crashing down. They lived on a knife's edge, their nerves stretched taut. The suspense was a constant companion, a silent member of their crew. Finally, after weeks of grueling labor, they felt the drill bit break through the final layer. They had reached the inner sanctum of the bank's strong room. A wave of triumphant relief washed over them, but there was no time for celebration. The most critical phase of their plan was yet to come. They had successfully created the passage. Now, they had to wait for the perfect moment to strike. They chose the long weekend starting Saturday, December 29th, a period when the bank would be closed for 3 consecutive days, giving them ample time to execute the heist and make their escape. The night of December the 30th was the culmination of all their planning and hard work. With the storm still providing a cloak of darkness and noise, the gang made their move. The bank was closed for the Sunday holiday, and the streets were empty. One by one, they slipped through the hole they had so painstakingly drilled in the floor of their rented restaurant. They emerged into the silent, cold darkness of the South Malabar Gramin Bank's strong room. The air was still, and the only sound was their own heavy breathing, a mix of adrenaline and anticipation. Armed with gas cutters and crowbars, they turned their attention to the massive steel vault that stood before them. This was the final barrier between them and the fortune they had risked everything for. The metal was thick, and the locks were formidable. They worked with practiced efficiency, the blue flame of the gas cutter hissing as it sliced through the steel door. Sparks flew in the darkness, illuminating their determined faces. It took hours of intense effort, but finally, with a loud groan of protesting metal, the vault door swung open. What they saw inside, honestly, just took their breath away. Before them lay stacks of cash and, more importantly, countless sealed boxes containing gold jewelry. It was a treasure trove beyond their imagination. The glint of the gold in the beam of their flashlights was mesmerizing. For a moment, they just stared, awestruck by the sheer scale of their prize. But there was no time to waste. They quickly began to work, breaking open the boxes and stuffing the gold and cash into large bags they had brought with them. They worked systematically, grabbing everything they could carry. After hours of frantic packing, their bags were overflowing. They had secured nearly 80 kilograms of gold and millions in cash. Their mission was complete. They left behind a scene of controlled chaos, the gaping hole in the vault, the empty boxes strewn across the floor, and their discarded tools. As a final, brazen act of defiance, they left a message scrawled on the wall, a challenge to the police. Then, one by one, they descended back through the hole in the floor, carrying their immense haul. They slipped out of the restaurant and vanished into the rainy night, believing they had just committed the perfect crime. On the morning of Tuesday, January 1st, 2008, after the long holiday weekend, bank manager K.T. Shanavas arrived to open the branch for the new year. He walked in, expecting a normal day, but was immediately struck by an unsettling stillness. As he approached the strong room, his heart began to pound. He saw the vault door, brutally gashed and hanging ajar. Peering inside, he was met with a scene of utter devastation. The vault was empty. The boxes were broken and scattered everywhere. The gold and cash were gone. For a moment, he stood frozen in disbelief, the reality of the situation slowly crashing down on him. The news of the robbery spread like wildfire. Within hours, the quiet town of Chelembra was thrust into the national spotlight. Media vans swarmed the area, their cameras pointed at the unassuming bank building. Reporters delivered breathless updates, calling it Kerala's great bank robbery and comparing it to a Hollywood thriller. The sheer scale and audacity of the crime captured the public's imagination. The police arrived in force, cordoning off the area and beginning what would become one of the most intense investigations in the state's history. The pressure to solve the case was immense. Forensic teams swarmed the crime scene, meticulously searching for any clue the thieves might have left behind. They dusted for fingerprints, collected soil samples, and analyzed the discarded tools. The hole in the floor was the most significant piece of evidence, a clear indication of the robber's method. Investigators were stunned by the criminal's patience and daring. The message left on the wall was both a taunt and a potential clue, offering a glimpse into the culprit's mindset. But tangible leads were scarce. The gang had been careful, wearing gloves and cleaning up after themselves. The investigation, led by a special team under Canna SP K. Sathuraman, began to piece together the puzzle. They interviewed locals and began looking into the recently opened restaurant on the ground floor. The fact that it had never truly opened for business raised immediate suspicion. The police learned that the men who rented the space had provided identification, but it soon became clear that the IDs were fake. However, one of those fake IDs contained a photograph. That photograph, a small, grainy image of an unknown man, became the single most important clue in the entire investigation. The hunt was on. The photograph from the fake ID was the breakthrough the police desperately needed. They circulated the image across the state and beyond, hoping someone would recognize the man. The tip-off finally came from a police informant who identified the man in the photo as Joseph, a known criminal with a history of similar, albeit smaller, crimes. With their primary suspect identified, the police began tracking his movements. They analyzed call records and activated their network of informants, slowly closing the net around Joseph and his gang. The chase led them to a hideout in a neighboring district. The final confrontation was set for a tense midnight. A heavily armed police team, moving under the cover of darkness, surrounded the nondescript house where the gang was hiding. They had been celebrating their success, believing they had gotten away clean. The raid was swift and silent. Before the gang even knew what was happening, the police burst through the doors, shouting for them to surrender. There was a brief moment of chaos and panic, but the robbers were caught completely off guard. They had nowhere to run. The game was up. Inside the house, the police found what they were looking for. Hidden in various bags and containers was the stolen loot. The glittering gold and bundles of cash were all there. The recovery was almost total. About 80% of the stolen property was seized on the spot. Joseph and his accomplices were arrested without a major struggle. The masterminds behind the great Chelembra Bank Robbery, who had worked for months to execute their perfect crime, were brought down just weeks after their audacious heist. The cinematic plot had reached its dramatic climax. In custody, Joseph was surprisingly calm. During interrogation, he confessed to everything. He explained his inspiration from the movie Dhoom and detailed the entire planning process with a strange sense of pride. He narrated the story of the restaurant, the nightly drilling, and the final break-in, almost as if he were recounting the plot of a film he had directed. As Joseph and his gang were led away in handcuffs, their faces illuminated by the flash of news cameras, the story of India's real-life money heist came to an end. It was a stark reminder that even the most brilliantly planned crimes rarely have a happy ending for the criminals.